You know who I have with me here, Z-Pack? The legendary Dr. Abraham Verghese. He is a legend on so many levels, and I'll tell you why. Because I have been wanting to talk with you forever and ever and ever, because you're a physician of Indian origin who has done so much in the humanities in terms of being an author, trying to bring back the touch and the relationship and this to medicine where it's been lost. And so to be able to have you on the show is such a huge honor. Dr. Abraham Verghese, thank you for coming.
The honor is mine. Pleasure.
Now, you are a professor of this or that or the other thing. Can you give us your full credentials?
Sure. I'm a professor of medicine at Stanford University. I'm the vice chair of the Department of Medicine, and I hold a professorship called the Linda Meyer and Joan Lane Provostial Professorship.
That's a lot of stuff.
That's a lot of words.
That's a lot of stuff. But you didn't, what really attracted me to your story, and we knew each other briefly at Stanford when I was practicing. You had come just as I was leaving.
Yes. Yeah.
Is your path...
It wasn't me, I hope.
It was totally you. I was like, there can only be one bald Indian man in this facility at once.
I have to tell you a story, though.
Blah.
I get confused with you. People stop and say, are you that Z-Dog guy? And I'll say, he's younger and he's better looking, thinking that they'll contradict me, and they'll say, yeah, you're right.
Okay, Dad, are you listening? Because this guy, very famous, truly Indian, okay, not just pretending like me, and he said that he gets confused, okay, so I bet you better. So that's amazing, actually. So a lot of my fans actually are big fans of your books.
Oh, that's right.
So, I mean, Cutting for Stone, My Own Country, The Tennis Partner, these books are really iconic in the sense, especially in the medical world, especially, even though they're widely known and you've won awards and there's a picture of you with Obama there and I mean, you're the real deal. But the thing about these books is that they bring a medical perspective from a practicing physician who is on the front lines. And that is so much missing in much of our literature and in the humanities, because when we do medicine, we often let that stuff, the creative spark. Mm-hmm. And I'm here in your office at home in the Bay Area, and I'm seeing how you work and how you let the muse come through you and how you outline everything. And for your next book you're working on, and to see that and be a professor of medicine at Stanford, this is what I want to bring to you guys, Z-Pack, is how we can learn to reconnect with our inner passion and the humanities and the humanity in what we do that makes it a calling. And so that's what I wanted to talk just as a broad framework.
Yeah, I'd love to talk to you about that. I think we have to remind ourselves that this was always an art and a science. And, the doctors that we admired and the names we trot out, William Osler, they had books at their bedside, and they weren't medical texts. They were reading the classics. They were well versed in what's out there. And I think, the creative part of medicine is very much what makes us good doctors, but it also keeps us refreshed, keeps us alive. And I worry about the whole, I'm all for evidence-based medicine, but it can seem like the soulless, passionless exercise of algorithmic thinking. When to me, the fun part was always the human being at the end of this experience. Both the physician and the patient and their humanness is what makes this so very special.
Well, so I think that you kind of nailed what has sucked some of the joy out of medicine for people like myself. When it went from that sitting at the bedside, right? And always coming into the room and sitting down and making eye contact and talking to the patient, especially in the hospital where they really are at their most vulnerable and they're scared and they're waiting all day for you. Yeah. And then that you come in, stand, make a U-turn at the bedside, looking at an iPad, clicking the buttons with the flock of geese following you as an academic. It's devastating to why we went in. Yeah. And like you said, Osler and these guys, they were classically humanities trained in addition to being medically and scientifically trained.
Well, I think we have to be sensitive to the idea that the data set that we're dealing with, would just, terrify Osler, I would imagine. And there's just no way to sit and juggle that by keeping it all in your head or the intern presenting from a clipboard. We now have vast amounts of data. So in a sense, we do need the computer. We do need all these things that are taking up more and more of our time. The trick is to try and find a way to integrate them better so that we can still feel like we're at the bedside sufficiently.
Well, and I think that's the trick. Like, you're not a Luddite. Like, I see your computer here. I see this fancy microphone. You are a communicator. You use technology. What you're not saying, and some people I've heard critics of yours actually say, he wants to bring us back to the witchcraft days of medicine, where we're just about this intuition that fails us so often.
Oh, far from it.
Right.
You know.
So,
I mean, I'm learning to use an ultrasound. I'm, very much into.
what?
Well, somebody John Kugler, I hope you talk to him one day, has become the sort of pioneer on ultrasound in internal medicine, and I think it's the next stethoscope. And why not? If it's at the bedside, rather than sending someone off to a suite, to me, that's all part of bedside medicine.
That's the secret. So we just did an episode about point-of-care ultrasound in the OR, in the perioperative setting.
Yeah.
And the fact that the anesthesiologist normally sends the patient off to have a study or something like that.
Yeah.
Now the anesthesiologist is looking at the patient, laying hands on the patient, putting the probe on the patient. Right there.
Yeah.
It's so different. It actually brings us closer. Yeah.
I'm all for that. I think that you're right. I get characterized as being a Luddite and anti-technology. I'm only anti to the things that don't serve us well. And when a technology doesn't serve us well, when it's all cut and paste and repetitive, and when you walk into the intern's room, the resident's room, and they're all facing the computers, and we're having no dialogue, I think we have to sort of figure out better ways to do this.
The electronic silos have been devastating. It's interesting, as much as, and for people who don't kind of understand what Dr. Verghese' stance is in all this, he's really you did a TED Talk, you've done a lot of work around bringing bedside medicine back, and that sort of the physical exam and the ritual aspects of it, as well as the scientific, the technological aspects, integrating them. That's your sort of, that's the gift that you bring to us. Eric Topol, Dr. Topol down at Scripps, who's a friend of mine as well, and he has been sort of pigeonholed into he wants to replace all of that with technology.
That's not true either, is it?
It's not true. No. He is very much a bedside clinician.
Very much so.
And so all of us agree that technology serves the human relationship, that there's a deeper, almost spiritual calling to what we do, meaning it's bigger than us. Right?
Yes.
And that if we can build our technology and our processes that where we get to do this, and this stuff, the technology takes this stuff off our plate, then we've done a service to the healing.
Absolutely. And I think we have to be really careful not to imply that if we got a better electronic health record, we'd all be at the bedside. Actually, studies have shown that in the era when we didn't have the electronic medical record, we didn't necessarily spend more time with the patients. We probably spent more time at the elevator waiting for it to take us down to radiology, pull up the films. I don't know if that was before your time.
Oh, no, I did that. Yeah.
All the time we wasted looking for the jacket.
Yeah.
But we also ran into other colleagues in radiology. You got to talk to the surgeons. You got to talk to the radiologists. And now that I can pull up my images anywhere around here, we're not getting those kinds of interactions, which we're realizing are some of the unintended consequences of the advances in technology. So I'm all for technological advances. I celebrate them. We need to make a science of looking at the unanticipated human consequences every time we roll something out, because it'll come.
That gets me thinking a lot about when I left Stanford to move to Las Vegas to build our clinic, Turntable Health, and this idea that it was replacing a transaction, which is a copay, a visit, with a relationship. That was our goal.
Yes.
Part of the drive for that was Tony Hsieh, who was the CEO of Zappos.
Yes.
His whole vision was, we want to encourage return on collisions, ROC, getting humans to collide with each other, and the unanticipated benefits that come of that. In medicine, it's exactly what you said. If you go down to radiology, because that's where the physical film is, and you are forced to talk to my wife down there, which is the only time she'll talk to anybody because she's a misanthrope. I'm kidding. She's working right now, in fact, at Stanford.
Really, yeah.
You could get an insight or a connection or a spark of wisdom. And she actually, Margaret, my wife, told me stories about when you would come down with the team. And
I'm one of the few who still does that.
He was one of the few who still come down with the team. So you had a gaggle of students and residents and interns and Dr. Verghese, and they would come down and they would ask her to go through the film, look at the different parts, clarify things, talk it out. And she loved that. That's why she went into radiology. It wasn't because she hated talking to people, quite the opposite. In fact, she board certified in medicine with me at Stanford. We met as interns,
Wow.
And but then she was like, you know what I hate about medicine is you can't know everything about the interaction. There's a black box there, whereas in radiology, it's all there.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
up to you to know how to, So,
You know, I hear anecdotally that fewer students are going into radiology. I'm writing letters right now for the fourth year medical students.
oh, wow.
I haven't met one yet who's looking for a radiology spot. Maybe there are more that I'm missing, but it used to be, we used to talk about the road to success. Do you remember that?
It was radiology, ophthalmology,
Orthopedics.
orthopedics, derm,
Anesthesia.
Anesthesia, derm.
So now it's the ode to success. It's OAD, you see.
Oh, so what happened to radiology?
Well, I think there's a perception that you're lonely down there. Not many people are coming to see you. They can get the image anywhere. They can get the interpretation done remotely. They may not need you one day, and there are all these fears around that.
Yeah.
I don't know that they're justified, but
Right.
that's certainly the perception. So my understanding is that, here's a technology that's actually put in jeopardy the very technology itself, in a sense, or the people who brought it to us. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I have this argument with my wife because
That's not smart.
believe me, it's not smart to argue with Mrs. Harvard Stanford because I'm a child of public education, Berkeley and UCSF, and I lose every time because of funding. It's purely funding.
That's
I'm just telling you that. But the truth is, the argument is around, I told her there's a fair chance that radiologists are going to be replaced by AI within our working careers. And she disagrees. And I ask her why, and she says, you don't understand the human piece that actually goes into interpreting those shadows. That it is integrating a lot of information, yes, but there is an unspoken piece that often comes from this, where Dr. Verghese comes down and gives this piece of information that the computer doesn't have and will never have.
And I agree with her. I agree with her totally. And I also think it's sort of a specious argument to pit AI against humans.
Okay, we had a little technical glitch because my iPhone went blah, 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 because it doesn't like AI. You know why? Because the robot overlords from the future are watching this, and they're like, if he starts getting into AI, it's gonna change the course of history. So we were talking about my wife and our disagreement over whether radiology will be replaced by AI, and you were saying it's a specious argument because
Yeah, I think it is because we don't need to pit AI against the physician. Every tool we've picked up in the last 200 years, from a stethoscope to an ophthalmoscope, it's never been there to replace us. It's just made us better at saying what's going on.
Yeah.
So I completely agree with her. I think AI will do a much better job of presenting to the radiologist cleaner options to look at, but ultimately it'll be some human being to try and make sense of that, because we can keep refining it, but I think we still need someone at that end to put the story together and have a dialogue with the patient, which might be happening more in radiology than ever before, I suspect.
There are radiologists who are talking about
Yes, very much so.
Yeah, who are bringing sexy back to the
It's so frustrating. You get an MRI on your knee or something.
Yeah.
It's there, you can see it, but you can't be told what's there.
Right.
It has to go through the circuitous. And I would love for the radiologist to come out of that suite and come talk to me and say, hey, I was watching this and here's what we're seeing, and you can talk to your orthopod. I mean, why not?
Why not? And, I was talking to Patrick Ha, who's going to be on the show tonight. He's a head of ENT neck surgical oncology at UCSF. And as a friend of mine, and we were going to talk more about HPV cancer. Now, he was saying, and some others here at Stanford, I was talking to some other radiologists here, they have technology now where you can do an intraoperative MRI.
Wow.
So they roll the thing on rails, and the magnet on rails into the OR, and say you're having a brain tumor removed, your skull is open. Instead of closing the skull and sending you back, they can bring the MR to you, and the radiologist is there reading and can talk to the surgeon in real time and say, you missed a spot right there. And it's transformative.
Yeah.
So but it's that relationship.
Yeah.
And I think what we've seen is we've seen this siloed off. You know what it is? It's not that we don't want technology. It's that we don't want bad technology.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, and speaking of bad technology, so this brings us to the EHR piece. piece.
About which you seem to have an opinion.
I have a couple opinions. And here's the thing. I love technology. You saw the little device I'm using. I think it's disruptive. Everything. It's brilliant. The EHR, I had such high hopes. I was there at Stanford in 2004 or whatever when Epic went live. I was on call that night.
Oh my, yeah.
And I went from paper to plastic very, very quick. And you saw the promise. You know, all the data was there.
Yeah.
So many errors were removed. However, new errors were introduced.
Yeah.
And you know, if they switch a radiology PACS system, new errors are introduced every time. And we forget about that stuff. We don't acknowledge it, and we incentivize the wrong things. Meaningful use. Everyone should have an EHR with this and this and this capability. Well, is there any evidence that what you're asking for actually makes a difference? Maybe you should ask us.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
we kind of know what matters.
I think that's the missing link. I mean, the whole thing was designed, as you know, very much around billing.
Yeah.
And as useful as it is, I don't think its fundamental purpose was to ease our life or that of the nurses or everybody else who's using them, or the patient for that matter.
Heaven forbid we care about the patient, right?
And so I think that's where the clunkiness comes in. And yet, you know, I think I badly would love to see the kind of computer technology that allows us to have a very complex patient and have them just laid out like this board here, where I can truly see the trajectory of their illness, rather than having to sort of scroll through screens. And you know, that's what AI and that's what a good EHR should be doing for us, is giving us a version that we can digest and understand, and allow us to go to the patient and say, okay, I have a better sense of you.
Oh, that's so exciting to even think about. Because I mean, look, I'm going to give a flash of this. Can I flash your
Please,
whiteboard?
yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so he's writing a new book. He's sequestered here. He has this process. This is a storyboard. All right? That's what it
Which
looks.
I don't follow. I keep running away from.
He
it.
runs-
Go in the other direction.
Because he's an actual artist. It's like you can't really. But the thing is, what you just said actually is the first time I've heard it put in those terms, that an EHR could actually storyboard a patient's, not just their illness, but who they are.
I mean, I go to some of these presentations, or you go to a Hollywood, a Disney production, and the graphics that they're using, the things that they're doing, bring us some of that stuff. What are you holding back, right? Give it to us.
Look, here's how we do audio. Right? It's not complicated. It's simple. It's elegant. With an iPad, I can capture your voice. I can augment it. I can do things. With an EHR, it's just a cash register that's clunky based on old technology that had to fulfill a certain mission that's now outdated, or should be outdated.
Yeah. I mean, I think perhaps we underestimate the complexity of what it takes. And Epic was, you know, at the forefront of having a system that worked for everybody in every setting. But, you know, it's hard for us to appreciate that because we're left with just what we perceive as the terrible clunkiness, the time suck.
Yeah, and you know, the Epic people have reached out as well to me, and they want to talk about, let's talk about...
Well, at least they're talking to you. I'm on their hit list, okay?
I tell you, when we put out our videos, sometimes I wonder they disappear. And I'm like, these guys are professional hackers. But the thing is, it's not about Epic. It's not me hating on Epic, although I use them because they're the 800-pound gorilla. It's that we want to be at the table. We want to be in the room where it happens, to quote Hamilton.
Yes.
And I feel like we haven't been. And I think it's our fault. I think we haven't owned this as our problem. We complain about it really well. And we meaning the royal group of physicians and nurses and frontline clinicians, because we're busy and we have other things that really take our time, and to have to think about the technology, to think about the water the fish is swimming in is very hard for the fish.
Also, I think it's happened so incrementally. It's not like overnight someone said, okay, for every 1 hour you spend with the patient, you'll spend 2 hours on the record. It was, you know, one keystroke added at a time, quality measured there, a little bit of this there, another billing click, and pretty soon you're like 10,000 clicks a day, and suddenly physicians were like, you know, I can't do this. And this whole physician wellness is the first moment I think that administration picked up on this. I mean, we at Stanford and big medical centers simply cannot afford the recruiting costs of bringing someone here and then having them after a few years get unhappy and leave. You know, this is just not a viable thing for any big medical industrial complex. So, by God, it got our attention. I'm really proud that Stanford took the lead in, you know, starting a physician wellness program, recruiting a physician wellness officer.
Ryan, what's her name?
His name, Tad Schanfeld. He's
That's right.
most
that's
well-published physician in this area from Mayo Clinic. And, I think because we're really seeing this as big a problem as anything else that's on the horizon that we have to grapple with.
You kind of nailed it. The costs of recruiting and retention are so high because we've gotten something wrong in the system.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's been death by 1,000 clicks. So click 1, click 2, click 3, and
Exactly.
it adds up. And the next thing you know, like you said, for every hour, you're spending 2 on the documentation. Nobody intended this, right? It's not, we're not victim of some evil genius who wants to destroy us.
True. I also think that we're at fault in the sense that all our individual lobbying organizations, that represent hospitalists or you or me, I think we've spent too much time in Congress fighting for our reimbursement, our financial interests. So, when we start to get behind a good cause, whether it's anything from, this sort of thing to wellness to gun control, people are ready to tune us out because I think when we had the voice at the table, and to some degree even now, it was all about, don't cut my money.
Yeah.
Which is understandable, but it makes it hard for us to then take on the big moral issues and say, well, we have a stance on this,
Are you a member of the AMA?
No, I'm not.
Neither am I. And the thing is, the reason is I felt that was the focus. Is we were lobbying for these little bits and grabbing little bits and not seeing the big picture. Now, again, and I'm not picking on AMA.
My reason was different, if I may tell you.
well,
what.
yeah, tell me.
I mean, I was a foreign physician. I think for the longest time, the AMA acted as though we were invisible, that, we simply weren't there. And they kept denying that there was a physician shortage when every year there was this influx of people like your parents and myself who had to come in to staff the inner city hospitals and places that relied on foreign medical graduates. And I must say, to the AMA's credit, they, in the last 10, 20 years, they've really embraced the international medical graduate. We have our own lobby and forum, but it wasn't that long ago that we simply didn't exist.
Wow. And I never heard that from my dad. My dad was never a member of AMA, but he would get frustrated about how IMGs were treated and so on. And my mother as well, being a psychiatrist. Yeah.
That's one of the great things about this country is that whatever this country lacks, it imports.
Yeah,
Whether
that's
it's
true.
basketball players or
Oil.
baseball players
Right.
or physicians to fill the needs of inner city hospitals that we're not producing enough medical students to graduate and go fill. And I think that, acknowledging that is a good thing. I think a lot of the motivation for writing My Own Country was also to not just describe this, disease, HIV, in the heartland of America, but also, the anachronism, the strangeness of all these salt of the earth folks being taken care of, for the most part, in the small mining towns by the foreign medical graduates who were willing to go out there and work and provide yeoman service.
So you guys should definitely check out that book because, again, I think it does capture exactly that ethos. And it's a paradox. This country has a lot of innate paradox, but that's one of them is that, we do import these very smart, these are top of their class folks from their countries. And, we just did a parody video. I might have sent it to you, man. I haven't had a chance to check it out.
Yes.
Yeah, One Sikh. So it's really a tribute to some of the stereotypes, but really some of the way that we don't acknowledge that these guys are doing the heavy lifting. Guys and girls are doing the heavy lifting. My parents, for example, this was a tribute to them and how, they had to work so hard. They had to work triply hard for the same thing. And so that's why your story was so compelling too, because, born in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, to expat Indian parents, and then going and training in India for med school, then doing residency at Boston, and then again, in Tennessee, was it?
My residency in Tennessee.
Oh, I see,
And
yeah.
then fellowship in Boston.
Oh, got it. Yeah. And what was your fellowship in?
Infectious disease.
An ID.
Yeah.
And then you're seeing GRID, right?
Yeah,
Gay-related immune disorder. Yeah.
I mean, it was an exciting, scary time. And just as I was finishing my fellowship, the virus was established that it was a virus. So I don't know if you remember that period when...
Yeah, but we didn't know what it was.
We didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
And the blood test was established, and it showed that for every one person we took care of in the hospital, there were probably thousands out there carrying the same virus.
Right.
And everything we knew suggested that it would have the same downhill progression as the folks we saw in the hospital. But I was moving to Tennessee, a small town, population 50,000, and everyone expected that I would see one patient maybe every other year because AIDS was this urban problem.
Oh.
Instead of which, in a very short time, I was seeing about 100 people with HIV infection. And it was basically a story of migration. It was young gay men growing up in a small town, leaving for all the reasons that you and I leave small towns, and decades later the virus finding them, and they were now coming back because their partners had died, they were sick, and there I was at the tail end of this quiet
Wow.
migration. And I wrote the book. I became a writer essentially because that story, even though I wrote a scientific paper describing it, the compelling nature of that story, the heartache of the families, the individuals, and my own grief at seeing that again and again, just made me feel that the language of medicine didn't quite capture it. Maybe that's why you do comedy also, right?
It's so funny. I'm like getting vaguely emotional hearing your tale of this, because that is why I do what I do too. Although mine is not, to see that and that idea of coming home with this illness.
Yeah.
You're from a small town.
Yes.
I'm from a small town. And this idea of coming home and then being with this disease that people associated with urban excess and immorality and all these other prejudicial things.
Yeah.
And by the way, we talk about this now on the day. I just released a clip with my brother-in-law, who's an infectious disease professor at University of Michigan. He talks about the new HIV treatment guidelines. The fact that we treat it as a chronic disease instead of a death sentence is a testament to medicine as a science.
Yeah.
But what you wrote in that book is a testament to medicine as a human endeavor.
And it was also a tribute to those little towns, because people are ready to characterize, that little corner of Tennessee, Virginia, and imagine that these patients would have been received, prejudicially and treated poorly. But the amazing thing was that family trumps all
everything.
previous prejudice.
Trumps
And,
everything.
To see families rally around their children, rally around gayness when it's something that they would never have thought they could ever come to terms to. That's the reason I wrote the book. It was a tribute in many ways to that small town. Something to admire about America greatly.
It really is, and it's a distinctly American thing.
Very much so.
And there is. We were talking a little earlier about how politics has become so polarizing, and this is a great example of how this idea of family and loyalty is a moral palette in certain parts of the country.
Yeah.
And it's less established in other parts of the country where diversity, inclusion, justice is more valued. In certain parts of the country, it's almost evolutionarily necessary to value a sort of our solidarity as a family or as a tribe or as a town. And so the acceptance of this otherness of being gay, it doesn't surprise me, actually.
It doesn't. Good.
In the setting of family trumping that
It's in the setting of good values that are inherently going to come through.
that are shared. Exactly. So and that's a wonderful kind of twist on that story, because it is a stereotype that there's so much prejudice and so much in small towns.
Yeah.
And I've not, I grew up in that small town environment. Yes, there was prejudice and bias and that, but it wasn't something that you couldn't overcome by being part of the community.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, indeed. I feel the same way. I feel very proud to be an American. I became a citizen in that corner of Tennessee.
Yeah.
And, it was a very warm feeling, having lived in Africa, having my education there interrupted by civil war, coming here, working as an orderly for a year before I could finish, in India a year and a half later. I just felt like this was the one country where, everything that you aspired to be, you could. Becoming a citizen was a way to sort of embrace that, and you didn't have to worry about someone knocking on your door with a gun or, taking away your rights. And, I think in funny ways, I think us immigrants perhaps appreciate and celebrate the richness of America in a way that others can stop seeing because they take it for granted.
As a born in, American-born Desi, I often miss that. I went through a phase actually in probably sometime in the last 10 years where I was very much like, what is going on in this country? And I don't feel part of it. And I could live anywhere and do it. And that has totally gone away. Having traveled the country, having done the show that I do, having talked to people from everywhere, having seen the bright spots and the stories and the humanity, this is still the most amazing most inclusive, warm place in my feeling.
Absolutely.
And it took me going through that little valley of despair to recognize it.
Well, see, I remember, growing up and, recalling the moment that John F. Kennedy got shot and seeing the despair in the streets of Addis Ababa.
Wow.
So far away from, where this was actually happening. And the Emperor of Ethiopia flying to walk in the funeral procession.
Haile Selassie,
and it was because, what America represents and represented, especially embodied by Kennedy, was this beautiful embrace of all things noble. These values that were never going to change.
Yeah.
And I think that, we perhaps go through phases, but I don't think we've ever lost the kind of things that are in the Constitution that, very few other countries can point to so proudly.
Yeah. No, you nailed it. It's interesting because Tom and Logan and I really got into Hamilton, the musical. And part of the reason, I think, it doesn't matter what your political bent is, because we span the spectrum, right? It's about the really magical thing that happened to create this beacon in the world, and that these founding fathers and their wives, who are an important part of it, and all this group of people that built this country, built something that lasts as a beacon and a legacy to the world, and has set the bar for how we should treat other people, and how we should, even you go through slavery and you go through, like you said, there's a wave forward and a little bit of a recession and a wave forward. And we've been through the horrors of those things. Internment of the Japanese, we've been through that. And I think when you come out the other end, bigger for it, more transcendent, then that's what makes the country even stronger. It doesn't weaken us.
I think the thing that's polarizing us, I suspect, is less around politics than it is about the polarizing effect of poverty and the increasing gap between the haves and the have-nots. And it's a huge problem, and I think that's at the root of a lot of the things that superficially appear to be political problems, but they really are, I think, problems of equity, access, income, good health care.
Right.
They come back to just fundamental things that a government should, I think, work hard to provide.
And I think we can talk about social determinants of health as a major problem. All of the problems in terms of poverty, bad education, violence, crime, etc., are laid at the steps. Many of them are laid at the steps of the healthcare system. And I've talked about this, that on our shoulders is the weight of all these social issues that we have failed to address. And then we wonder why a $3 trillion expense is not buying us better health.
Right.
And I think we really have to look at those issues. And it's not necessarily, look, you can span a political spectrum and still figure out ways to reduce wealth inequality, to open up opportunities for people to participate in the bounty that is America without, giving it away or creating entitlement and all that. There's plenty of ways to do this. And there's plenty of ways to use science and data. And that's where I think the technology too, the EHR has given us an opportunity to gather data. And once we get enough data points, we might be able to come up with solutions that actually don't make intuitive sense.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love the promise of big data,
right?
The promise of AI. And again, I love the fact that we're now not as naive as we were when we first opened our Facebook account or, embraced the EHR. We recognize that with any of these things comes, an opportunity to crash big time if you're not paying attention.
When you were writing your books, and this is a little tangential, but it just popped in my head. When you were writing your books, you're working at institutions as a physician. Did you ever worry that you were going to lose your job because of something you said in the book?
No, not because of something I said in the book. My books were very self-revealing in that sense. I would talk candidly about my marriage and so on, but they weren't fundamentally untrue. So,
but doctors don't do that. Typically.
Well, but it's not as though I got up on Oprah and dropped my pants or something.
I've been wanting to do that.
I'm writing this in a book, and if you do me the honor of buying the book, preferably buying it, not borrowing it, and reading it, then you're entitled to know this thing about me. I must say, it wasn't easy for me to write that way. I think it took my editors, 2 different editors, and 2 different books. The first 2 were memoirs. To say, you know what, Abraham, you've become a character in this book, and you can't, every time the lens swings over to you, you can't just shut the screen.
wall,
You've got to really be willing to, since you're a character becoming transformed by these individuals with HIV, or in The Tennis Partner, you're the best friend of this young medical student physician who's going through the throes of drug addiction, and
Right.
you know, you're actually enabling him without even realizing it. So you've got to be willing to turn the lens onto yourself. And so, you know, it was hard to do, but once it was done, I was happy with it.
I've noticed that about authenticity, because on my show, a lot of times something, especially when we do it live, but even when we don't, I'll say things that I never meant to reveal. Like it'll just come out, and it's because I feel it at that time, and I need to tell people about it. And then if I sat and cogitated on it, if I really thought about it before I did it, I would never do it.
You wouldn't do it.
Would never do it. But once it's done and it's out in the world,
Yeah.
I feel this sense of this relief. No matter how embarrassing or how personal, it feels like I've done a service to myself by saying this.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if that was a similar process for you, or if it was something different. Did your editors really have to pound on you to get this?
They did to a degree. I
Yeah.
mean, my naive notion was that I'm writing a story about HIV. I'm writing a story about doctors and drugs.
That was your thought going in?
I mean, it was my
Yeah.
thought going in. I didn't recognize to what degree it would almost become a device for me, that I was the character being acted on even as I'm observing what's happening. I would say there's some parallels with what we're doing
What we're
here.
doing now,
Yeah.
because every now and again I'll adjust the camera,
There
I'll
you
make
go.
sure that, and it's kind of like this third wall, or it's a fourth wall, I forget what wall it is in film, but so using yourself as the device versus using yourself as yourself. How did that transition?
I mean, you are using yourself as yourself. You're actually willing to turn the lens in and show how, you know, for example, when I came to this country in that HIV era, I was not homophobic, but I was homo-ignorant.
Ah.
I don't think I knew an openly gay person.
Sure.
My only knowledge about gayness were these stereotyped jokes and, you know, behaviors that I'd seen, sort of bad behaviors by heterosexuals towards gay people.
Right.
And, you know, to come all the way around to where I would think that gay men taught me more about manhood than anybody else I ever met. That they showed me how one could be, you know, when you take away the male posturing for women, gay men sort of teach you the possibilities of malehood.
Wow.
You can have a healthy interest in the arts. You can be talented in the kitchen. You know, you can do all these things. It was sort of a revelation to me. I think that my best friends then and now remained, you know, gay men who sort of brought a lightness to my being that I wasn't aware of before.
You know what? You kind of nailed the queer eye for the straight guy phenomenon.
Is that what it's called?
That's what it's called. So there's a show.
Who knew? Okay.
Yeah, there's a show called Queer Eye for the Straight Guy. And it became very big early on, and then it disappeared. Then it came back with a new iteration. And it was like 3 or 4 gay men teaching a straight man how to improve his life, whether it's decoration in the house, whether it's wardrobe, whether it's how to cook, whether it's those kind of things, so that he could be better in relationships with women. And it was such a cultural hit, because I think it was exactly that. People stripped away, you stripped away all the posturing, and now here's how to be a better person.
And with them, it was even more poignant, because the ones that I remember best, who I mentioned in my book, My Own Country, they were giving up their lives far too young.
Yeah.
They never lived to reach your age or mine, and they were dying of this disease. And in that death, they were generous, continued to be generous, and they continued to support each other, and their partners continued to volunteer in clinic. And they were teaching us, you know, don't postpone your dreams. You know, the things that are important to you, don't wait too long. This life is fragile. You know, it's transient. Celebrate your relationships. All the things that sound like cliches, but seeing it happen to someone who's your age and dying. It was profound. It was the moment that I decided that I would take a little break from medicine and go to the Iowa Writers Workshop if they took me, and become a writer, because I heard from them, you know, don't postpone your dream. And my dream was to tell that story. And I couldn't see how I would do it without getting off the treadmill.
Yeah, off the treadmill. So you took what, like a year or 2 years? How long did you take off to really train to be a writer?
So I went to the Iowa Writers Workshop, which is this unique place where you meet once a week. They discuss 2 stories from the students that are submitted the previous week. When it's your story, you sit there and you don't say a word, and you have the privilege of people who care deeply about writing respond to that and tell you, you know, this was great till this moment when the story clunked. It just the fictional dream crashed because of this thing you did. And it was very humbling.
Yeah.
The sort of stuff you're parents think is cute and your wife thinks is precious just doesn't fly there. You know?
destroy it. Yeah.
In fact, when your spouse becomes deeply disturbed by what you've written,
Yeah.
you found your voice.
Oh,
That's the
wow.
moment.
That makes sense, actually. My wife, so there's certain episodes she cannot watch.
I can understand that.
Because I get angry,
Yeah.
I get emotional, and she feels it as a presence that it makes her uncomfortable. And because I actually don't let those things out so much in our relationship. So that's
So
fascinating.
I left a tenure track job, cashed in my retirement, and headed off to Iowa. And the only people in the medical world who understood, and I was by then an associate professor, and I was doing work in pneumonia, had friends everywhere. The only people who understood were the people at Iowa, because they had the Iowa Writers Workshop in their backyard. They'd seen people like John Irving and others come through. They knew what that was about, and so they embraced me, gave me a visiting appointment, and when it was all done, I was ready to get back on the treadmill.
On the treadmill.
On the academic treadmill, and I was I interviewed in Reno and Las Vegas, but then I thought, what am I doing? Because all those jobs were at that stage where I was going to be like a chair of medicine at the VA in Reno or things like that, and they were going to be very administrative.
Yeah.
And I just backed out of that whole interview process, and I took a job in El Paso, Texas, where I was going to be on the faculty, teaching students, seeing patients in the county hospital, and that was it. And my nights and weekends were mine. No grants, no NIH stuff.
No minimal administrative.
Minimal, and I was attending an ID 12 months a year, and I was, doing general medicine 4 months a year. But it seemed to be
that's
a relief.
That's my brother-in-law. Same thing. Yeah.
And I tell my students all the time that life is ironic. Had I come to Stanford in the first place, then not that they would have ever taken me. Let's say
tell me about it. They are real buttheads about that.
Just about now, I would probably be losing my tenure and heading to Texas.
So you would have,
because I made the choice to go to Texas, and I loved it. I think I learned more medicine in that county hospital than anywhere else. Because I went there, I wound up writing these 2 books that brought me here. So life is ironic. It's not always linear, and you just embrace the things that come your way, and you never know how they take you to the next place.
That's an amazing story.
I mean, look at your story. I mean, look at where you are.
Well, it's interesting because
I'm impressed.
No, don't.
Not really.
By the way, I emailed him.
That's why I like imitating you and pretend that I am.
I emailed Dr. V and I was like, please, I wrote this big long email trying to explain why it'd be cool if he was on the show and what the show is and so on. And I just get the response. It's like, yeah, I'm a fan. I'll do it. And I was like, huh? I was so ecstatic. You should have seen my wife. Was like, he said yes to you? Yeah, he did. So, the story of like life taking you. And I tell the Z-Pack this all the time that you have to be open to these possibilities.
Yeah.
You need to allow for ROL, return on luck. So if you're not in a place of openness, when luck hits, you're not going to capitalize on it. When I left Stanford, it was the hardest thing I ever did in my life.
I can imagine.
Here I am. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
I had this gig. It paid really well. I had a 401k. I had the house in Belmont on the hill. I was living this Bay Area dream. But deep down, I'm like, why am I making videos and putting them on YouTube? Because I'm unhappy with how things are, because there's something wrong. And so going to Vegas was a huge risk. Now, 6 years later, having run a clinic, closed a clinic, grown this thing with these guys, and having this now opportunity to bring people's voice out to the world, I'm back in the Bay Area.
It's wonderful.
And it feels like it's a strange and wonderful feeling to be able to be with someone like yourself who's at my institution, who, when I was, a medical student, a resident here, I would have just been like, oh my gosh, Dr. V.
I don't see myself that way, but thank you.
We never do, but it's a real honor. So El Paso, Texas for 10 years?
11 years.
11 years.
Yeah. And I loved it there. I mean, there was something about those wide open spaces that,
I
mean, many writers gravitated over there. Cormac McCarthy was there.
Wow.
And Rick DeMarinis. And, I think it's like the endless horizon just gave you this license. I mean, I still miss it. I love the place.
But the tax rate is nice too. So
Sorry?
no state income tax.
Yeah,
So,
that's true.
you know, I like that. That's
No
a
state
wide
income
open
tax.
horizon as far as I'm concerned.
But you know, coming to Stanford has been a dream. I don't think I could have found a medical school more willing to do what they did, which is embrace my writing as being my research equivalent. I mean, everywhere else I was hiding the writing. I was doing it on the side. I was, you know, doing it after hours. But Stanford, the Department of Medicine, really just sort of, you know, I'm sure I try their patience at times. A 7-year book project is not quite the same as a R01 grant coming in. you
Right,
know.
right.
So,
No,
but,
but you're a national treasure, man.
Right.
And honestly, it shows their wisdom, and I'm actually very proud of that institution for doing something.
I
like
am
that.
too. I mean, I'm in awe
Yeah.
of being here. But I don't know if you have this feeling. You probably don't. But I keep having this feeling that someone's going to tap me on the shoulder and say, "Okay, we're on to you. You're out of here."
You know what? Now
He's gone.
Now you've touched on something that's a real pain point of mine, because this is what we call imposter syndrome.
Yeah. But the only moment I don't have it, 2 weeks ago I was attending on the wards, and I was in the midst of all kinds of crap going on in my life, tensions. Everything was fine. It's the one moment that
Flow state.
I'm not an imposter.
You're in your
I'm in it. Yeah. Isn't that something?
You know what?
That's our calling. That's what we do.
You know you're in your calling.
Yeah.
The thing is, the imposter syndrome, guys, where you feel like at any moment they're going to tap you on the shoulder and go, "You're not supposed to be here. We screwed up. We put in, it was Abraham Verghese, and it wasn't you. And now we're going to have to rewind.
We
all
thought
this."
you were Z-Dog. You're out of here.
and so but that's very common among creatives, among successful people.
Is it really?
It is, and it's actually been studied to some extent that it is almost a requirement for people who attain certain levels of accomplishments, because if you don't have that innate fear or feeling that you're not doing what you're not good enough, you don't necessarily have the drive and also the self-insight, because you and I both know when we look inwards, we see something there, we see us. It's not what the world sees. And at least for me, I'm speaking for myself, my inner feeling is always, if the world saw me the way I see me, they would just see this shriveled, insecure mass of goo, and they're not going to like that. And that's the nature of my imposter syndrome. Yeah.
But you know, you do something very different in your art than what I do. I mean, I'm at this desk 12, 16 hours a day in a private dialogue with myself, you know, dreaming my way through the story.
Wow.
One day readers will see it, but it's happening in solitude. It's happening so quietly. And I see you and your videos, and it's a very, I mean, so I can't believe that you're saying that you feel this imposter syndrome, because it seems to me you really own your space, your body, your voice, your...
See, to me, you even telling me that, you, who I hold on in such a pedestal, is it doesn't make sense. It doesn't compute to me. But again, that is part. Each of us does our thing in our own way. Actually, that what you just said about sitting here in solitude for hours, communing with yourself and dreaming your way through the story. What a beautiful description of the creative process of what you're doing.
That's how I think of it, and you know, you're often wrong. You know, it's like. You can only see as far as your headlights show you. I don't ever see it all the way to the end. I mean, I try with these whiteboards and all that. But you know, the magical thing is sitting there and realizing that you spent 8 hours and it's absolute crap. But then there's a moment where you step away, and suddenly, as you're trying to step away, suddenly it all breaks through. That's why you do it. It's like a fix.
Yeah, I've had that experience. You're banging your head against the wall, and then you're right. It all coalesces, and there's some magic.
I think it's the muse. I mean, I think that you have to be receptive to the muse, the right brain, whatever. You have to have your ass in the chair. At least for me, I do.
Yeah,
I can't do it while I'm walking past pastures in the stream. To me, I have to be trying. You know, my fingers bleeding.
Yeah.
And if it's gonna come, it can only come when I'm trying.
You know what? I would not expect anything less from a physician. That is our approach. To some extent, it's sweat equity for us. Yeah, that's how we were conditioned.
Right.
And that makes sense for me. Like if I'm writing lyrics or I'm thinking of ideas for a video or something funny, I have to get into a state where my thinking mind turns off. And it's just unconscious stuff, and it bubbles up. And then the thinking mind has to be present enough to recognize the bits that are funny. And a lot of times, if you don't do that right, you'll get a bunch of bits, you'll write them down, you look at them later and you go, what was I high when I did that? Like, this is not
So I think the art is in revision. I always
It is-
believe
it
that.
is- That's right.
The art is revision.
Have you ever heard the rough tapes, the demos for Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts
No.
Club Band?
No.
So apparently, and I've heard some of them, it was their early demo takes. It sounds terrible. It's the same song.
Yeah.
It's just 80% there,
Yeah.
but it's that 20%
Right.
where Ringo was like, it's not the right beat, or John Lennon was just got an extra tab of acid and figured it had the enlightenment, where it just made it magical. And I tell the boys all the time on my team when we're editing video, I'm like, the reason, and they know this, the difference between you doing a project for, mowing faucets as a commercial, as a video production team, and me, is that we're going to sit here with a fine-tooth comb going through every frame, every transition, every click point until it's just as perfect as we can make it. Because in that cohesive perfection emerges the
That's
art.
right. Yeah.
And so it's painful.
Yeah.
But you're right, it's in the revisions.
Yeah. It's funny. I heard the phrase, "God is in the details," both in medicine and in writing school.
It makes sense.
And the actual phrase is, "The devil is in the details."
devil is in the-
We've changed it to "God is in the details."
God is in the
Yeah.
details. There was a TED talk by the woman who wrote Eat, Love, Pray. And she talks about the muse. And she talks about making herself sensitive to it, and the idea that this term ole, that the Spanish say,
Yeah.
came from in African tribal villages. They would sit around the fire chanting and dancing. And every now and again,
Yeah.
someone's muse would hit and the dance would be transcended.
Yeah, yeah.
And through this dancer, they would see God.
Wow.
And being Islamic, they would say Allah, 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 Allah.
Became ole.
And when it came to
Wow.
Spain, it became ole. And so this idea that somehow you channel this greater thing through your art
Yeah.
means you have to be receptive. And sometimes receptiveness means revision.
Right.
So God is in the details.
That's right.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to derail you with something related to that.
Yeah.
That I don't know if you're going to like. Recent research on psychedelics, resurgent research on psychedelics, has creating a mystical experience.
Yeah, actually, I saw that in the New York Times Magazine because Michael Pollan's piece was right next to mine about EHR and all that. So
You get a piece in New York Times Magazine.
And you didn't read it?
Next to, I saw it online. About the EHR. Yeah, and I was like, this guy. But the fact that you get to me and Michael Pollan are just like, I hate you so much.
No, it's just we're pages next to each other. It's not like I was
Amazing.
fighting
So I'm reading his book right now.
Yeah,
and
I think it's a great. I think it's a breakthrough. I think the sort of backlash against the '60s psychedelic use probably has kept us from really understanding
That's right.
some of these drugs and their great potential.
The idea that Timothy Leary did tremendous harm to the movement by being Timothy Leary.
Yeah.
And the idea that now they're under controlled circumstances with guided experiences, people can have mystical experiences. Now, you had said a few things in the course of our interview, and I'm going to adjust this. There we go. And a couple of them, you said it sounds like cliche. It sounds like platitude. God is in the details. That family trumps everything. What Michael Pollan says in the book, and I feel this having experimented with psychedelics in college and nothing since, is there's what they describe, people who have these mystical experiences, whether it's meditation, whether it's prayer, whether it's psychedelics, is that these platitudes are experienced by them in a way that it transcends the ability to describe. That the platitude that they've known all their life
Is a shorthand for
is a shorthand
Wow,
for some
that's profound.
deep
Yeah.
spiritual truth about the nature of everything.
Yeah.
And so we say things like, God is love.
Yeah.
Well, when they experience this,
Yeah.
that everything is love, they come to you and they say, God is love, and you look at them like they've been doing drugs. And the truth is they've experienced it. And that's why I think people who have had religious conversion experiences, scientists who sit in awe of the Milky Way on a starry night, they have this ineffable experience that defies words.
Right.
And so these platitudes, they're not really platitudes.
Yeah.
They're just our monkey mind's way of talking about
lovely.
the divine.
I didn't realize that. That's wonderful.
Yeah, we can thank Michael Pollan for turning me on to that idea. Yeah.
But I must say, I think that, the great privilege of being in medicine is that, if you're not reminded any other times of your life in the care of someone who's really sick, you know, you're just reminded how precious this moment is, you know? And, you know, you don't need to smoke a joint to appreciate the way the light is hitting the leaves and, you know, just the richness of this moment. You just need to decide to slow down enough to enjoy this moment and be present. So, in fact, that word present means a lot to me. We've started a center at Stanford called Presence, and we're really, you know, interested in every aspect of the human experience of medicine, both patient and physician, and all the things that impact on it. You know, we have all the science around everything going on in your body, but if you come to us, at best you'll be described as a 33-year-old male, as usual state of health until 2 days prior to admission when you develop acute onset of. I mean, we don't begin to capture the richness of who you are, even though we can tell you all about your sodium and how it trends in time, and you know. And so I think that our interest is in that aspect of human beings. But to come back to that word present, presence is the word we chose because I think it's the one thing patients want more of. It's what we want to be allowed to do. We want to be allowed to be more present. And we're trying to develop these Presence 5 rituals. I don't know what they will be. We're in the process of this, funded by the Moore Foundation. But one of them for me has always been the idea that you wash your hands. And I learned this from a rabbi colleague at Stanford, Bruce Feldman.
Oh, Bruce is great. He was a doctor. And then became
he has a beautiful paper. He talks about how you wash your hands, but it's a reminder, because in every religion it's the same washing. It's a reminder that you're now leaving the secular space to enter the sacred space.
Oh, wow.
You know, and it's a reminder to be intentional. It's a reminder to be present. And if you can bring that to your day, not just to your moments with patients, but to your everyday, to your every conversation, to your interactions with every human being, it's a struggle. Don't think for a moment
it's not easy.
But when you do, I think you sort of hit on the edge of what perhaps psychedelics might
one gateway to
what one day show you need to do. But it's there, you know, it's there. It's at the end of your meditation. It's there. It's that sense of, this is what I need more of, this thing.
Oh,
you know?
Man, you know, see, this is the thing. And the fact that you, okay, listen, Jaco, he just combined something that's divine and bigger than all of us with a simple act that you would like to mandate, which is washing our hands before we enter the room. I think the most beautiful things are that, where this act helps protect our patients, but it also prepares us for the sacredness of the interaction we're about to have.
You know, the second thing I do, I always like to look at people's shoes.
Oh, tell me about this now.
First, a couple of reasons.
Because now I'm embarrassed because I wore slippers in here.
Well, I'm wearing slippers too, but because, I mean, it tells you a lot about them. For example, if you look under the curtain of a county hospital and you see shackles and an orange jumpsuit prison issue slippers, you know
what's up. Yeah.
But in a clinic, you also get to see what choice did they make in shoes, how is it worn, and all that. But even more importantly, it's that moment to put yourself in their shoes and how does this feel for them? You know, and then it's not about the EHR and all this. It's about, you know, how does this feel for them at that moment?
So again, we get to the platitude of walking in another's shoes.
Yeah, but I mean literally.
But if you really unpack that, what does that mean? It's a beautiful, difficult, complex thing.
Yeah.
And this gets me to one other thing I wanted to talk about, which is this idea of empathy, which whenever you Google Abraham Verghese, he is bringing empathy back to the bedside and this and that. And again, this is crucial. It's something that I advocate. But I'm curious what your thoughts are on empathy, affective empathy, feeling another's discomfort or feelings, versus a more cognitive empathy where you can walk in their shoes and understand, but you don't take their pain as your pain. And I'm curious if you think about that as a distinction at all.
Well, I mean, I think there is a distinction, but I think that we have done a disservice to our young physicians by suggesting that they need to maintain distance. And I mean, I know what people are talking about, but, you know, I think Osler began that. But frankly, I'm always just in awe when I see a medical student cry. I know they're going to be a great doctor. If you're moved enough by the suffering of this patient to cry, I don't have to worry about you.
Yeah.
You're going to be a great doctor.
Yeah.
You know, and so, you know, where does this come from? This unwillingness to and I think the flip side of this is if you don't react to what you're seeing, if you put up that wall, which admittedly you have to do in many situations, right? If somebody's bleeding on the street, you need to be thinking about airway, breathing, circulation, and not worrying about the widow and the 4 kids.
Yeah.
But I think that what happens in medicine is that the repetitive putting up that wall, slamming shut the emotional content of what you're seeing from the medical content, we begin to do that to ourselves. And the sort of the method of addiction that I discovered, the mechanism and behind many addictions in physicians, was that they'd done this for so long that they no longer could register their own emotional distress.
Wow. Yeah.
And when they became sick, they focused on a physical symptom, their back pain, their whatever. And oftentimes they got a Tylenol number 3 from a colleague, and anybody else, that colleague would say, wait a minute, how much alcohol are you drinking? How's your marriage? But a colleague would just
give them the drug.
And I remember one neurosurgeon telling me that he took a Tylenol number 3 in this very situation. And he said he felt this weight that he'd been carrying on his chest for 32 years just slide off. And he knew he was going to be addicted.
Wow.
Because he had never... And physicians don't take drugs to produce euphoria.
No.
They take it to relieve the dysphoria of their existence.
I have talked about this. I've actually gotten yelled at by patients, by chronic pain advocates, when I say things like, many times we are medicating emotional and existential distress with narcotics. It's not so much the physical pain, although it can manifest like that. It's a different thing. Tylenol can medicate psychic pain to some distress.
In this case, I'm not quite linking it to that kind of... I understand what you're saying.
Right.
What I'm saying is that they weren't taking it to get high.
No.
They just stumbled onto it and discovered that it had erased this emotional thing. But maybe we are saying the same thing.
Okay. I'm just saying it less eloquently because I am not good at that. You said it perfectly, which is they're medicating this emotional pain, or you said it slid to the side. It was gone for a minute.
It's just gone for a minute.
Yeah, and that is something that we desperately crave, and so of course you then want more of it.
Yeah, because we all carry a weight that we don't even know we're carrying.
Oh yeah.
And the moment that weight's released, it becomes very tempting to, how can I do that again?
This is why, and again, not to bring it back to Michael Pollan, but the psychedelics for addiction, you confront the weight in the experience of ego dissolution from high dose psychedelic, and you see it there. You encounter it, and you understand what it is, and you're liberated in some patients from it. So this is an interesting story he tells in the book. The founder, one of the co-founders of Alcoholics Anonymous,
was a doctor.
He was a doctor. And I don't know if that was the one who had this experience, but he had an experience with psychedelics and LSD and felt that it gave him this kind of glimpse, this spiritual glimpse that was the higher power to which he referred when he said, you must connect with a higher power.
Oh, wow.
Now, since then, it's evolved into religion or God, but it started with a psychedelic experience.
Yeah. It's higher power, whatever you conceive it to be.
Whatever you conceive it to be.
Could be your cat. But it's just...
My cat is a higher power.
Conceding that it's not you.
Right. Conceding that it's not you. And that you...
Are powerless.
And that you may even be a bit of an illusion. You're this kind of neuronal storm.
Right.
What's bigger than you is what stays.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's funny. We speak the same... I think we're getting at the same truth with different language. Which is how it has to be.
I should do you. I should just go up there on stage and just pretend to be you, shave the beard. And
He's a better version of me. More empathic, so this distinction, I make the distinction between empathy and compassion. I say empathy is kind of taking another's pain as your own, and the reason I'm less fond of that specific nomenclature is that Paul Bloom and others have talked about empathy being a narrow spotlight. You can only feel a narrow bit of pain, and that you tend to react in short term to try to relieve the feeling. Compassion is a bigger love in the face of suffering, but you have to have an empathic eye to feel that.
feel
suffering.
that, yeah,
So
yeah.
you recognize your patient, you walk in their shoes, you sit at the bedside, you cry. That's okay.
Yeah, yeah.
But then in response, you feel this tremendous love that doesn't tire, that doesn't burn you out, that grows with practice. The
Right.
Buddhists have been doing this, right? Meditation.
yeah.
So that, I think, if we can teach that to our students, and I'm going to charge you with that because you round a lot more than I do.
But I would push back and say our students don't need to be taught this. We just need to allow it to stay alive in them. They come in full of all the right qualities, and we just beat it out of them. We take their curiosity about you as an individual, and we teach them this language, which is necessary for diagnosis, about taking the unique story and making it 33-year-old male who comes in with acute onset of,
The shorthand.
So they are not lacking anything.
Yeah.
It's the experience of medicine that just beats it out of them. And the good news is it comes back.
Yes, it does.
Some version of it comes back. They find themselves, but I wish they didn't have to depart.
You nailed it, because I remember at the end of second year of residency, I was a robot. I had everything filtered through, and you know what triggered it ultimately was rotating on F ground at Stanford Oncology, and seeing young people who were dying. And it was probably similar to the experience you had with those HIV/AIDS patients, where you see this person and their humanity and their suffering, and you feel it, and I was in the stairwell crying and just but then immediately having to see the 20 other patients and take the call and do all of that. So bottle it up and go on with your day, and the more you build the wall, eventually you forget the wall's there. So it took me years for that wall to come back down, and when it did, it was such a relief, even though it was harder, right? But I felt like my patients now understand how much I care, instead of me having to hide it around this wall. Yeah.
I think we've gotten better, and our medical students come in better prepared to take care of themselves, more concerned about their own emotional state, their physical state.
Yeah.
That just wasn't true of our generation, where the great intern was the one who never left the hospital.
Right. You're strong.
Right.
Don't go pee.
Yeah, exactly.
But let me ask you a question, and again, I'll play devil's advocate a little bit. A lot of our generation and feel like the new interns, residents, etc. I was just talking to somebody at Stanford. I'm not going to say what department it was, but they felt like they've never seen the level of lack of responsibility, of ownership of the patient, a shift work mentality, a do the minimal necessary without curiosity, without drive, that they've seen in this incoming batch. And they said that it's been progressively eroding. That was their take. Now they are.
I completely disagree.
So tell me about that.
Yeah, I think that, they're not the ones who chose to be in that room with their backs to each other on the computer all that time. We did that to them. That's not their choice. In fact, I had a poignant email from a resident who read something I wrote years ago and said, I'm writing to you this message, from a computer from which I will not move for the next few hours. I want to do all the things you preach, but how am I going to do it? It's our fault. The shift work, that's our doing. We allowed, and I think, by the way, that work hour regulation was really necessary. So as brutal as it was in our era,
I agree.
I'm not one who thinks that, we should go back to
No, I agree. Yeah.
So I think that's really quite unfair.
Yeah.
Anything that our current generation of interns are experiencing is our doing. And frankly, we couldn't fix it. $3 trillion, GDP. I think that I see them and I'm just inspired. 2 years ago, we had our best go to the Brigham, but they went there on the primary care track. 3 of them were MBAs. They were going there to change the world.
Yeah.
They weren't going there, to do their own individual thing. So, they have vision that I think we lacked, perhaps.
Yeah.
So I would completely disagree. I think that they're polite and not telling us, you screwed up. What did you do that I came through medical school with all this passion and I'm stuck in this room, 8 hours a day, because everything I order, every exchange I have has to happen through here. I can't be with my patient. That's not their doing, that's ours.
It's funny because my team, Tom and Logan, they're 29 and 26 or so respectively, and they're my co-producers, co-writers, who I spend most of my day with in Las Vegas. They're millennials, technically, right? And it's funny, I often try to impose my sort of way of thinking or work ethic or whatever it is on them. Whereas they're like, well, you work that hard
Yeah.
because you think that's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Does it actually accomplish more?
Right.
Does it make you happy? Is it making a better product?
Yeah.
Or should we maybe do it this way?
Love it.
Which, and I was like, screw you guys, you
Yeah.
lazy millennials. And then I thought about it and I'm like, you know what? There's arguments both ways because I'm still entrenched.
Yeah.
But then I'm like, maybe there's something here. And I think that's exactly how we ought to look at it.
Yeah.
And then the thing is, it's because our systems haven't caught up too with
Yeah.
their way of doing things. We're still built kind of for
Yeah.
our way of
Yeah,
doing
yeah.
things. Our meaning our old, you got to work way too much, and
I mean, there are some things that we work very hard to bring back to them. For example, the joy of being at the bedside. 100 years ago, Osler could pick up all these things going on with the human body. If anything, we should be 100 times better because we have all this feedback. But the joy of showing them how much their eyes can tell them, the joy of showing them that their examination is still required for a neurological condition. The CAT scan might show you what it is or where it is, but only you know what the functional deficit is as a result of that lesion. Only you can do that on your exam. And I think introducing them to the joy of that, which has been a big part of my charge at Stanford, through what we call the Stanford Medicine 25 and Bedside Medicine program.
tell me about that.
Friends of yours, John Kugler,
John
Errol
Kugler,
Zalga,
great
just
hospitalist,
guys, Jeff Shee. I mean, this
Jeff
has
Shee's
become
fantastic.
So we're basically trying to bring back the excitement and the joy of, being great diagnosticians at the bedside. In addition to all the stuff you do, why not have a head start on the lab work and everything else? Because you nail the exam. You just think it's going to probably be this and that, and maybe you pull out your ultrasound and and then you get the test. You're asking a better level of question of your test than, well, let's see what comes back, figure this out,
Right.
And it keeps us young, it keeps us engaged, it's interesting.
Now, I'm going to give a pitch for this because the Stanford 25 is a course you're teaching. What month is it?
So we teach it continuously to our house staff, but we have this big national symposium. This one's happening in September.
Got it.
In the first week.
2018, yeah.
We'll put it on your...
I'll put it up on the link and everything, yeah.
And we have people coming from all over the world, and we've actually now formed our Society of Bedside Medicine.
Wow.
John Kugler is leading that.
I'm so glad John's doing that.
Yeah,
he's such a wonderful human being.
He's wonderful. He's wonderful. Talk to him about ultrasound one day.
I will. I'm excited because my wife is still. It's funny because my wife, being a radiologist, she's like, these guys are just going to make mistakes. And
we don't pretend to do much more than 2 or 3 simple things. We're not trying to do what they do. It's just some basic things. Your fluid status. Fluid before we stick a needle in. It's. I think it's safe.
Tremendously helpful. Yeah. I mean, when I used to do thoracentesis, paracentesis, I was going blind. I was tuk. I think.
Or send them down to ultrasound.
To mark it. That's if you're really concerned, and But a lot of it was using the force, which we got good at doing. The thing is, if there's a better way, why wouldn't you?
So that's where I absolutely would want to be doing ultrasound. As much as people would mistake me for being someone who doesn't want that, and I want to percuss and stick a needle. Far from it. Why?
Yeah. Well, and the thing about, so I think we'll put links to the course and to where you can get your books as well, because I think you said something earlier, which is preferably buy, don't borrow the books. And the thing is,
I was being facetious.
Oh, I know. But the truth is, I think artists should be able to be rewarded and make a living and get some sustenance from their work. And I think of it as in myself. People will sometimes complain that there are ads on the video. There may be ads on this video. The idea that somehow this is a horrible thing, but it's how we are able to continue to do our art.
Right. Yeah.
And so, that's important. I think the course is a tremendous gift, and people who are interested in bedside medicine and bringing
Please
that
come.
up. Yes. And again, these guys are great
This is for
teachers.
young hospitalists, chief residents, anybody who teaches people at the bedside and is a bit intimidated by that. Please come and we'll show you lots of good tips.
How about nurses and stuff?
Nurses, nurse practitioners. We were trying to train teachers. So if you're coming there to perfect your own skills, that's fine. But the course is shaped around the pedagogy of how do you take this ancient skill and get good at it and convey it to someone else.
Makes perfect sense. And any other pitches you want to throw in for Stanford as a residency program? Because I can vouch for it. It's dope.
I think it's only gotten better under Ron Vitalis' leadership. We're just a great program. We rock.
Ron was like my intern back in the day.
Oh, was he really?
Yeah, like he was 1 or 2 years behind me, and it's great to see what he's done. And
we look for brilliant people, but they have to be nice people too.
Heaven forbid. Why'd you take me? I don't meet either of those
I guess
criteria.
you slipped through somehow.
Did I ever tell you the story of how I got into Stanford?
No, tell me.
I've never told the story publicly. Can I tell it?
I don't know. I don't know what the story is. So,
All right, so here's the story. It's 1999. I graduate UCSF. I'm debating, do I rank UCSF number one or Stanford number one?
well, that was easy.
It was easy, actually. It was, because I was so...
My friend Bob Wachter is going to be really
Bob!
upset about this.
Bob's my friend, too. So the thing about UCSF is, again, I'd had 4 years of it, and I have a little seasonal affective disorder. So if it's cloudy, if it's foggy,
Yeah.
I become unhappy. And
Me
I
too.
was unhappy a lot in medical school, more than residency.
Yeah.
And so I saw Stanford. I loved Kelly Skeff, program director, and just a wonderful teacher, wonderful human being. And so I applied. I got interviews at UCSF. I got interviews at other top programs. I did not even get an interview at Stanford. And I was
Really?
beside myself. I couldn't believe... I could believe it because I had imposter syndrome. And I was like, these are the only people who understand what a total loser I am. And everybody else is fooled. And so, but the thing was, emotionally, I was so connected to this program because I'd kind of heard so much about it, and I'd known who Kelly was. And I said, okay, I'm going to do something I would never do. I got on the phone and I called the front office, and it was Fran Brumbaugh, who was
Good friend of mine.
She's a good friend of mine to this day.
Yeah.
And I said, hi, you don't know me. I applied to your thing. I didn't even get an interview. And I just want to know why, because I can't sleep. Because I just feel like that was my place.
That'll get to Fran.
It got to Fran. So Fran was like, well, sweetie, let me just pull up your file. And she pulled out the file and opened it up and looked through it. And she's like, well, you seem pretty smart to me. You know what? Just come by for an interview. And somehow I got tossed in the pile. The next thing you know, because apparently there was some glitch in, like, I didn't get honors in pediatrics.
You didn't get honors at pediatrics?
And I'll tell you why. Oh, well, it's political. I ended up calling in sick because I had gastroenteritis the night before one of these tests. And they thought that I was calling in sick just to study for the test.
Yeah.
But I was actually sick.
Wow.
So I missed a day of clinic, the one crucial day. And I think they wrote this in my eval. And I was like, I actually was nearly dying. So in any event, it didn't matter. I didn't feel like I deserved it anyways. But the thing was, that was enough for an algorithm, a computer, to screen me from the first batch.
Wow.
Whereas the other programs didn't use that algorithm. So she was the human
She was the algorithm.
behind the behind that stepped behind the algorithm and said, I see the human in this application. I hear him on the phone. And I got the interview. I got in. It was the best decision of my life. I met my wife first year. We were both interns at Stanford. We have 2 beautiful daughters.
Wow.
To this day, I owe Fran and Kelly and everybody there like everything that I have. And it was because a human being connected with another human
That's
being.
wonderful. Great story.
So I don't know. That was
We
tough.
need to get you back to the Department of Medicine. Do you know our chair, Bob Harrington?
I don't know, Bob.
Well, you should come meet Bob. He's just amazing, and really bridges that world of cutting edge science and clinical judgment, clinicians, big trials. That's his area, is clinical trials.
Oh, that's awesome.
So come by.
I will definitely do that.
He has his own show called At Heart Bob. It's a radio show, and
What?
yeah, I hate to burst your bubble, but there's more than one doctor out there with this
I
show.
told you about my imposter syndrome, and you take advantage of me. Like, well, he's also the chair of department at Stanford. Abraham Verghese, what a pleasure.
Pleasure
Thank
is
you
mine.
for talking with me.
Oh, thank you.
And I think everybody's going to get. Please, guys, check out the links to what Dr. Verghese is doing in the Stanford 25, in the Presence. Is it the Presence Institute or what
It's
is
the
it?
President's Center, the Art and Science of Human Connection.
I love that. And also hit share, send this to a medical student or a pre-med or a nurse to be or a nursing student who is feeling like all my mentors are telling me that medicine is going to suck and that I'm not going to be able to do what I really love, which is connect with others. And we're telling you no, that we take it back and we rehumanize it in a way that incorporates technology, and that you can all be a part of this. And we call it Health 3.0. I think you just call it medicine. But thanks, guys. Dr. V, we out. Peace.